I don't care what it takes. This fucking year, if I have to sell my left labia, this goddamn film is getting out in the world. I swear to God, if I have like one more like, oh, we can't do this because of blah, 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 I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. But yeah, it's going to happen this year. Come hell or high water, I will make it happen. Yeah, I want people to see this film. So I might be one labia short, but it will happen.
You're listening to Radio Free Mike. Welcome to Radio Free Mike, the podcast about freedom and its discontents. My name is Michael Scott Moore, and this is one of the first episodes of a podcast that should have started long ago, since the name of my website has been Radio Free Mike for years, but it's never had an actual audio component. We are fixing this dreadful vacuum in the media landscape right now as we speak. And today we're speaking to Meg Smaker, an independent filmmaker who became famous in 2022 when her film called JIHAD REHAB got canceled by the Sundance Festival. No one or very few people have been able to see it in the meantime, but the movie has a new title, and Meg swears it will come out in 2025. She swears by her left labia. Labium? Labia. We'll talk about that and a bunch of other things, including pirates, boxing, the California wildfires, and chewing khat in New York bodegas. Meg, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm in Northern California right now, so I'm avoiding the smoke in Southern California, but thinking of friends down there. You're down there right now.
I'm in Southern California, and it does smell like smoke, yeah. Luckily, I'm not at risk of evacuation, but it's awfully smoky.
Yeah. I actually, I'm kind of a freak. I love the smell. I absolutely, because I used to be a firefighter. So for me, it's like nostalgia. Right. So anytime I smell wildfire smoke, it's kind of like smelling like Pop-Tarts. It just takes you back to a more innocent time in your life.
It reminds you of a time in your life. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. How long did you work as a firefighter?
Let's see. I think 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004. And then I taught firefighting in Yemen for like 4 years after that. Right. So when I moved to Yemen, I was running a fire academy out there.
Right. That's so interesting. Did you move to Yemen on purpose for that, or did you move to Yemen and then find the job?
No, I moved to Yemen and then found a job. And I was pretty lucky because at the time, Ali Abdullah Saleh, who was the president at the time, he had just enforced a law called Yemenization. Yeah. So basically what that meant was in Yemen, they did have natural gas. They had natural resources, but they didn't have the human capital to take it out. So these companies would come in and they'd hire and pay foreigners to come to Yemen to take this resource out of the ground, which then meant that the locals really didn't see any of the revenue that they would have if they had been hired to work for these companies. Yeah. And so there was a lot of pushback, i.e., pipelines were bombed from the locals, and they made a bit of a stink about it. And then this rule passed, and so basically, before I started working there, all the firefighters were from France. So these French firefighters that were living in Yemen and working in the oil fields, and then they hired me to create and run a firefighting academy. Where I would train up Yemeni men to become firefighters and take over for the French firefighters. So yeah, that was a unique job.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's that experience in Yemen that led to the movie that became called JIHAD REHAB.
Yeah, it's funny. The documentary took, I think, 6 years to make total, but it actually was like 20 years in the making. I would say that experience, that was the start of that experience. And if I had not had the experience of living in Yemen and working in Yemen and learning the language and studying the culture and the religion, there's absolutely no way I would have ever been able to make the film, and I would have never gotten the access that I did. That's for sure.
Right. Wow. How many years total did you live in Yemen?
Okay. So I think I moved there in 2004 because it was like right 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008. I left in 2008, and then I moved to Qatar, and I lived in Qatar for a year. And then late 2009, I moved back to the States to go back to school and switch careers and become a filmmaker.
Did you go to film school?
Yeah. So my life trajectory is weird. So I'm gonna have to back up here. When I was 18, I went through a fire academy and got hired on for a season for the National Forest Service. So I was a firefighter for the feds. And then the next season, I got hired on for CDF, which is now called CAL FIRE, for a season. And then the next year, I was full time. And so I did that. And but when I got a kind of full time job, I dropped out of college. So I never really finished college. And then I think I had like 2 years under my belt. And then when I moved back from Yemen to the United States, I was just telling you about, that's when I finished my undergrad. And then after my undergrad, I went to Stanford, where I got a graduate degree in documentary filmmaking and storytelling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And while you were a firefighter in the States, did you fight these fires here in California?
Yeah. So CAL FIRE kind of, we I don't know if, back then, California had a pretty solid active fire season. Now it feels like it's year round though. I talked to some of my old firefighter friends and they're like, it's just, it's like it was during peak season, but almost year round now. So, so we went all over the state on strike teams. And so when there's huge campaign fires, like, 100,000 acres, the local fire department, that's beyond their resources capability. So we send what we call strike teams, which are engines of 5. And then you get on there and you fight their fire. And you have these huge incident command systems and these campaign fires. And there's these huge kind of well-oiled machines, hopefully well-oiled machines, where you're dealing with different fire departments from different cities, different counties, sometimes different states. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work. It's like I said, like when for me, like smelling smoke, wildland smoke always puts a smile on my face, because it's just all those memories come back of just like being on the fire line for weeks at a time. You haven't showered, you like smell, but everyone else smells. So like once you stink to above a certain level, you can't really smell yourself anymore until you walk into a hotel and like the person at the desk is like, Jesus, what died? So yeah. And I remember this one fire we went on, and I got back at the hotel and I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, God, I must have been in the sun a lot. I look so tan. Like I look like I had just got back from the tropics. I looked amazing. And then I got in the shower and it just all rinsed off. I was like, oh shit, I was real dirty.
It was all grime.
Yeah, I was so gross.
Yeah. Good. That sounds like fun, actually. Have you followed the fires that happened? So they came up in like one day. I mean, they really took me by surprise, but the winds were terribly fast.
Yeah.
And now everybody's trying to make political hay out of them, but I get the feeling
what political hay? How so? I've not been following.
Republicans are saying it's the Democrats' fault because they haven't cleared brush, and Democrats are saying it's global warming and everything like that. Of course, it's both, but these seem like perfect conditions for a very serious fire during fire season.
Yeah, I mean, I have not been following it closely in full disparity, but I did see some of the wind speeds were like 85 miles an hour.
Yeah.
It seems like perfect fire weather conditions. And
it's been really dry.
Yeah. It's a tinderbox basically.
It's not just Santa Ana's, but strong Santa Ana's. That's how it felt just before it started.
Yeah. So. When I was a firefighter, I went down there a couple of times for fires, and every time when I went down to Santa Ana's when I was a firefighter, it was the first time I saw a fire tornado, or we call finger, and it looks like an upside down tornado of fire, and it can like kind of hit down other places and cause like spot fire. It was the craziest thing. It was kind of.
What are those called?
We call it fire fingers. I called it a fire finger. Sometimes little fire tornadoes.
They actually are burning material.
Yeah, it's just like it looks like a little tornado of fire kind of thing that comes up. It's kind of surreal looking and kind of end of days and very beautiful. It's weird. If you've ever been on a huge fire, it actually is pretty. You kind of just sit and stare for like a little bit because it's just insane. Because it's kind of like,
I can imagine.
When you get around a bonfire, you can just stare at the bonfire.
Yeah.
Right. For hours, and it's very hypnotic. And I think it's something in our DNA as like, cavemen who all sat around a fire, right? But imagine that like on a huge scale, you're just like, wow. Yeah, fire was like, cable TV for cavemen. We haven't kind of
course.
evolved
it's
past
always
that.
interesting to watch a fire just in the fireplace. So I can only imagine that if your entire environment is burning, that's
it's the one thing I miss about, like, I had to move this last year, and I had a fireplace in my last house, and I don't have one here. So it makes me very sad that I don't get to burn fire every once in a while.
Yeah.
But,
Well, tell me a little bit about Jihad Rehab. What is it about and what happened?
Yeah, so I'll give you a Cliff Note version, and I'll come back when the film's out and dive more into it. So basically, like I said, I was a firefighter for a while, and then
in Yemen,
in California, and then I moved to Yemen. I taught firefighting, and then when I moved back, I switched careers and went to school for filmmaking, for documentary filmmaking. And so when I left school, I wanted to do a project, and this rehabilitation center. So Saudi Arabia has this rehabilitation center for extremists and terrorists, and it's the first terrorist rehabilitation center in the world. Yemen had a program. They were the first one with a program, but the Saudis were the actual first ones with an actual physical center for this. And as a firefighter on 9/11 in California, but knowing a lot of guys in FDNY, I always was very curious about the men who did this, why they did this, like what would lead them to that, what was their life like that led them to this decision. And nothing in mainstream media ever kind of delved into that and felt, authentic and true. Because I remember hearing back in the day, they hate us because our freedom and that kind of stuff. But so when it came time to do my first huge big film, I thought it'd be a really interesting opportunity to be able to sit down with these men and basically get to know them and try to understand and answer that question. And that question of like, why?
And so it's a film about a rehabilitation center for people who had been in Guantánamo.
No, not just Guantánamo. So the center in Saudi Arabia they do take Guantánamo detainees, but they also take, and this is their words, not mine, normal terrorists. And these are the guys they catch that go from Saudi Arabia and go to join ISIS in Syria, or during the Iraq War, they went to join Al Qaeda in Iraq, and they kind of, catch them and throw them in terrorist prison, because in Saudi Arabia they have two different types of prison. They have prisons for normal criminals, and they have separate prisons for anyone convicted of extremism or jihadism, or not jihadism but terrorism, because they do not want those to mix. Like, you don't want an extremist converting someone who has hacking skills. So they keep those separate.
Interesting.
The American government didn't do that during the Iraq War, and they learned that lesson the hard way with some of the prisons we had in Iraq, unfortunately. But,
you mean some people with hacking skills got radicalized, for example?
Well, some people with criminal skills were kept in detention centers in Iraq, and exposed to people who were radicalized and extremists, and then converted those people to the cause, and then they brought that special skill set with them.
Got it.
So so basically the film itself follows guys who are in Guantanamo, but the center itself also takes guys who aren't from Guantanamo, who were just, joined these groups or were somehow affiliated with some of these extremist groups, and other charges as well that we would probably not say is terrorism, but under the Saudi government, they classify it as terrorism.
I see. Okay.
So basically the film follows these four guys who spent about 15 years in Guantanamo each. And they are released from Guantanamo and sent to Saudi Arabia to go through this rehabilitation center. So I kind of meet them after they get off the plane, and I follow them for like a year and a half through the rehab program. And then a year and a half after, when they try to find a job, find a wife, start a family. And it's pretty much just like following four men on this 3-year trajectory. So I lived in Saudi Arabia for 3 years while I was filming this. And the film has a lot of layers, as you know, because you've seen it.
Yeah.
But I would say that it's just trying to understand who these men are and their motivations, and doing it from a place of curiosity and really trying to understand all the nuance and the complexity of it. And, there's this Dostoevsky quote that I actually used to have in the film, but I took out because you probably shouldn't have a Russian author quoted in a film that takes place in Saudi Arabia.
Maybe not.
But
wait, why?
Well, it's strange to have different. It was weird to have a Dostoevsky quote start off a film that takes place in Saudi Arabia. It just felt strange.
The cultural context is wrong. Yeah.
It's but the quote was, I think, relevant, and I think it's from Crime and Punishment, where he says the easiest thing in the world is to denounce the evildoer. Mm-hmm. The most difficult thing in the world is to try and understand him. Mm-hmm. And again, you're not agreeing with him, you're not sympathizing with him, but to actually genuinely try to understand the person who you perceive who has done something evil or bad. But yeah,
of course, no, that's the work of the novelist, and that's the work of the documentary maker, and the work of the journalist.
Yeah, you hope so. I don't know.
You hope so.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're listening to a free preview of this episode. And if you'd like to hear more, please hit the link in your show notes or in the bottom of the email we've sent you and sign up over at Substack. The whole podcast is open to subscribers to Radio Free Mike. And you can hear the whole thing at michaelscottmore.substack.com. Thanks for listening.